Hello, my name is EJ Schultz, Assistant Managing Editor of Ad Age. Welcome to Ad Age Remotely. I'm happy to be joined today by Adrian Parker, VP of Marketing for Patrón. Hi, Adrian.
Hey, EJ. Happy Cinco de Mayo.
Happy Cinco de Mayo to me. You beat me to it. You're joining us from Dallas today. I'm in Chicago. This is not the Cinco de Mayo either of us probably had planned, but here we are, stuck at home. But Patrón is making the best of the holiday. Can you explain how your brand pivoted and what you guys are doing today?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I think, Cinco de Mayo, I call it the Super Bowl of tequila. It's a celebration that, every year in America where we see tons of tequila consumption. But more important than that, it's community, it's celebrations, it's, the best of Mexican cuisine and culture. And so for Patrón, the number one tequila brand in the world, it became, much more of an opportunity to still showcase that. So even though we're socially separated, we can still celebrate and add those things of comfort, add community to people by celebrating simply on Instagram tonight. So 5 p.m. Eastern time tonight, we're bringing you 20 bartenders making 20 different margaritas to inspire your at-home Cinco de Mayo. So yeah, it'll be a great celebration, but I think more importantly, just about, taking the time to step back after Zooming and homeschooling and all the stuff we do. Take a step back, have a great virtual happy hour with us, and support the bartenders that are going to be coming live to you tonight. And give them a tip, give them a shout out. So let's celebrate Cinco. Do it safely, do it at home, but let's have a good time.
So I want to ask you a little bit more about this, but before I do, I want to cue up the 15-second ad you guys have been running to promote tonight.
Oh, cool.
Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it.
So when did you realize that Cinco was not going to be the same? And how did you guys, how long ago did you start putting these plans in place?
Gosh, I'd love to say we had this pandemic brief already written in our back pocket, like every smart marketer had. But no, I think for us, we were caught off guard and very much flat-footed about probably 7 weeks ago when the pandemic reached crisis level in the United States. And, reflexively, our first thing was to protect our people. And so, we closed our offices. We worked from home across the globe, but also we did donations for bartenders and mixologists because, so many restaurants were closing their doors and we wanted to support the people who were supporting us. And after we, covered the basics, we looked at Cinco and we knew Cinco was going to be different. We knew at this stage, people are still sheltering in place. Our research shows us that 50% of consumers likely won't be comfortable going back to any sense of normalcy until there's widespread testing or a vaccination, which is months away. And so as we looked at, our plans and our research, we knew Patrón had an opportunity just coming off our best year ever in terms of profitability to carry that momentum into a Cinco de Mayo plan. So we looked at footage we had already had, right? We weren't going to fly anywhere to do a video shoot. So we repurposed footage from some of our margarita content. We pulled in our agencies and our resources from Mullen Lowe to Razorfish to Mbooth. And, we quickly in 2 weeks pulled together a new plan for Cinco that still had the same inspiration, right? It's about celebrating Cinco with your friends and your family with a great margarita, in true Patrón fashion. But you could do it in a way where, we're separated at home, but we're not isolated. So we wanted to bring together the best of bartenders and, consumers. But yeah, it's about a 2-week process to retool and, it's come to life today. So I knock on wood, we hope people tune in.
So I'm joined by Adrian Parker, VP of Marketing from Patrón. I want to remind our viewers, if you have questions, to submit them on our social channels. Adrian, I know the live Instagram event is not the only thing you guys are doing. I know you actually have some some trucks that you're putting out there in a few cities that actually you're going to have a physical experience too. Can you explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. A typical Cinco, we would probably be doing some kind of activation in cities across the world. We would have bartenders making amazing drinks and we would be together physically. But we knew we were going to take the opportunity because today is Tuesday, Taco Tuesday, anyone? Hashtag. And so we knew we wanted to take the opportunity to, really celebrate our bartenders and those people on the front line. So we're providing taco trucks in various cities, Dallas, Denver, et cetera, to just support people, to, make it a fun Cinco. So you can get, free tacos on Patrón. We're also doing cocktails to go. So in 16 states across our country, there are still restaurants that are, they're open doing delivery and takeout. And so you can actually order a Patrón margarita and have it delivered with your fajitas or with your enchiladas or whatever your food of choice is. And so there's still a physical component. Obviously about 25% of our business happens on the entree, which is restaurants, bars, and et cetera. And even though that business is, in crisis and, greatly decreased, we still want to support the people who have supported us for so many years. So it's a great opportunity to still get physical, still support with a drink. And lastly, I'd mention this, EJ, and I hope you update your Zoom background today. We do have various Zoom backgrounds for Cinco. So you want to be in an agave field, in a bar, on a beach, you can go to the Patrón website and download a Zoom background for your calls. It's a little way to celebrate Cinco.
Sounds good. You mentioned those numbers, 25% you normally get from bars, restaurants.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's pretty much vanished. But the big story I know in alcohol has been this surge of store sales, right, and e-commerce. But the math, it leaves a question about the math. Like, are you guys generating enough lift in your store sales to make up for this bar, the losses you have at bars? How are you looking at this, and how are you guys pivoting to kind of adjust that math?
Yeah, even though our digital commerce or e-tail sales are booming, this time about a few weeks ago, typical March, this March, we were up 55% over last time, March, right? So we know people were pantry loading. They were stocking up on their comfort brands, which includes, food, rice, beans, but also, for a lot of people includes alcohol and wine for that comfort, after a long day. And so we've seen a stratospheric increase in our digital commerce. In fact, our forecast shows us that this year, our digital commerce driven sales will probably grow anywhere from 4 to 5 times what they were on the previous year. That said, there's no scenario where, you replace 25% of your sales during that year via just online delivery, et cetera. And so, I think we're taking a conservative approach to support the consumers in a manner that's appropriate. For some, that's, going to their liquor store to order. For some, that's an app like Drizzly or Instacart. And so we're going to see that business continue to explode while still being thoughtful and conservative about how people are going to get back to restaurants, the states open, things like that. And so it's very much a wait and see approach, but we're going to be ready. We're going to be adaptive. We're going to be nimble with our marketing spend, but also with how we approach our messaging.
So we have an international audience today. A lot of people interested in what you're doing. We have John from New York, Scott from Iowa looking on. We have Suraj Bali from Nepal, and someone from Nigeria as well tuning in. So apparently there's a lot of interest in what Patrón is up to on Cinco de Mayo and tequila. You mentioned the e-commerce shift. How have you reorganized your teams yet around this? And can you kind of take us behind the curtain a little bit, and kind of, as this is becoming suddenly this hugely important channel, like, has this forced you guys to do something completely different from how you were doing it before?
Yeah, it's an interesting time to be in marketing, but also just in business. As the American supply chain and consumers have been largely resistant to, I'd say, digital commerce for many years. You go to parts of Asia, the Pacific, even Western Europe. Digital commerce, the act of, ordering your meal or, a drink on your phone or a website is common. In America, actually, less than probably 5% just, a year ago. And so I think we're going to see that change and shift how consumers are evolving and adapting. But we still got a long way to go. Like, even if we double and triple our business, to put this in perspective, Amazon, right? The juggernaut of e-com, online sales, et cetera, they're only 5% of US retail. And so US has still been like a laggard, I think, in many. Some of it's regulatory, some of it's just restrictions based on our tiering and our business practices. But I think you will see states, but also businesses adopt a much more digital-centric approach in terms of putting the consumer at the heart, putting them first. And so for Bacardi Limited, who is Patrón's parent company, so a year ago, we started our digital transformation. So not only was that hiring digital talent in-house to complement our agencies, but also it meant hiring a digital commerce dedicated team. And so we've got teams all across the world, in Miami, in London, in Dubai, in Barcelona, et cetera, who are dedicated to not only Amazon, to digital commerce partners, but also to making sure that we're getting more than our fair share of revenue and growth from that channel. So we've absolutely hired and upskilled. And, our goal would be in the next 10 years to have at least 20% of our revenue as a company come from an online channel, whether it's a pure play retailer, whether it's a e-tailer, I should say, or whether it's an online affiliate like a Drizzly or Instacart, et cetera. So we know it's a growing opportunity, and we're continuing to invest in that as a resource, but also as a sales channel as well.
Is there anything you've learned in these last 6 weeks during the lockdowns that you think you will continue using going forward when it comes to e-commerce?
Yeah, you know what? E-commerce for so many years, like I said, had been kind of an afterthought. It's been a bolt-on. I think overnight, I think about even our e-com team, and I reflect on when I started in kind of digital specific roles about 10 years ago. You were the last person invited to the meeting. It's like, oh yeah, we got to invite that digital person or that social person, right? And now it's flipped, right? Now it's like, okay, well, digital, you should lead the meeting, you should lead the conversation, et cetera. So I think internally, it definitely allows us to be much more adaptive and nimble. Digital marketers, for instance, have always been fighting to put the consumer at the heart of the journey. And so for whatever reasons, like where it's bureaucracy, regulations, legacy companies or cultures, it's always been that resistance to change. I think you'll start to see a much more adaptive approach to building teams, resources and messaging. But also, I think you'll see a much more human approach. Like I said, nobody had a pandemic brief in their back pocket. And I think this has allowed us, we're using words in our briefs now like empathy, connection, comfort, hope, optimism. I mean, very few brands had those words, maybe a Nike or a Starbucks, but very few brands had those as a core part of their DNA and how they wanted to talk to consumers. But now we are. So digital is accelerating, I think, much more of a human connection than what we had before, even outside of the technology and the AI and the AR. That's great. But I think it's facilitating human connections that I hope will stick around long after we found a cure for COVID-19.
So we have a question from LinkedIn from SynLab London, who is asking, I think this is referring to Cinco de Mayo activities. Are you doing anything outside of the US?
Yeah, absolutely. I think outside the US, so Patron's in 100 different countries across the globe. Obviously, US is, lion's share of tequila consumption, but, tequila is a growing and emerging opportunity. So we're doing a few things. One is still focused on the trade. Bartenders and mixologists who have been displaced from their jobs, they've served us and supported us. So we're activating with them. Every single day we're doing IG moments with bartenders to just train other bartenders how to run a bar, how to do virtual gigs, how to do demos, et cetera, so they can have a way to replace their income virtually. We're also doing something called the Patrón Pantry Challenge. And so you can check that out online in various countries. We're having bartenders across the world show consumers, right? How can you make a margarita with what you have on hand? How can I make an old fashioned with tequila instead of a whiskey, right? And so, we're absolutely virtually activating across the globe, outside the US, to support the bartenders, but also consumers who are have a love affair with tequila. And I think we're educating them on what tequila is, what it isn't, and how to enjoy it in a way that's just fun and responsible as well. So absolutely look online. We're activating across the globe to make sure, everybody can celebrate on their terms.
We have another question from LinkedIn from Joseph, who's asking, what creative advantages are you finding in your marketing voice in this shelter-in-place landscape?
Oh, Alfred, you creative director or something like that. That's a good question. No, I think from a brand voice perspective, this, a crisis doesn't create your character, it reveals it. And I think from a brand perspective or organizational perspective, a crisis like this reveals your brand purpose. And our brand voice has always been about the people, about being helpful, and about celebrating moments that matter. And so the Patrón voice is that we've stepped into that. And so one of our first things we did was support people, our donations to the trade. So $1 million donation to families of restaurant employees, to their children, to organizations for grants. And so it was probably less of an advertising voice, more of as a company, we want to stand behind our people. So that was one we kind of leaned into. But also, Patrón has always been about celebrating moments and treating yourself, right? So after a long day of homeschooling or Zooming, having that way to just have a simply perfect margarita. And so we continue to flex into the brand voice that we always had, but less about, some of those communal occasions. So, less about events, concerts and some of the celebrations. This time, our plan was to be on starting a summer tour where we're going to cities across the globe at concerts and festivals. Well, that's not happening, quite honestly. And so I think we pivoted our approach and our brand voice to be much more supportive, much more just back to the basics, informal, educating about tequila, but also just being celebratory and not taking ourselves so seriously in a time where, it is very serious for a lot of people.
We're joined by Adrian Parker, VP of Marketing for Patrón. And I want to remind our viewers again, if you have questions, to submit them on our social channels. You talked about the summer plans that now you've scrapped.
Yeah.
How do you view celebrity marketing these days? Are you guys still working with celebrities, and does that take on a different form now during the pandemic?
Patrón has always had this very enviable position that I take no credit for. I've been marketing for Patrón about 6 years and took on the global vice president role about 8 months ago. But we've always been in this enviable position that I take no credit for, is that we've been organically embedded into culture, into celebrity songs, music videos, movies, you name it. And for so long, it was seen as this slick, gimmick-filled marketing. But actually, no, all of it's been organic. And so from a celebrity perspective, we don't really do a lot of celebrity endorsements or spokespeople. There's a lot of celebrity tequilas out there, to be quite honest. And, I think one of our things is we always just focus on our people and our process. One of the secrets of our industry is that 99% of tequila brands actually don't make their own tequila. So you can be a tequila marketer and not actually be a tequila maker. And we're one of the few brands that actually makes their own tequila, which sounds crazy to say. And so our focus has been more about the authenticity of how we make the world's best tequila with people down in Mexico, crafting every single bottle, hand signing every bottle. And so the celebrity support has been great. We don't discourage it. We support it. A lot of you might have seen Lizzo at the VMAs last year, taking a shot of Patrón Platinum on stage. That's great. And we support, celebrities in terms of, if you have something going on, we'll support, might send them a engraved bottle, but all of it's been really organic. It's been about tapping into authentic relationships versus renting relationships. And I think we'll continue to see that pay dividends and think long-term, as a brand and as a marketer. While he's not thought quarter to quarter, we're thinking decade to decade, and how do we build relationships the right way as well. So, celebrity tequilas and celebrities are great. For us, it's been about the people and supporting those who love us.
So along those lines, we have a question from Kristen on YouTube, who wants to know, though, even though you might not be doing, paid celebrity stuff, are you doing anything to merge with emerging musicians? I know with obviously, festivals, concerts canceled, some, struggling musicians out there.
Yeah.
You guys, anything in the works on that front?
Great question. Shout out to Kristen. Thanks for asking that. I'd love to shoot these guys a note. I'd love to know more about you if you are a musician. Nothing formal on the musician level. I think, we've obviously supported the events and sponsorships before in terms of activations and festivals. Quite honestly, a lot of that is still in flux. And so I think we're still assessing, hey, when do we get back into venues, into sponsorships or concerts and events? And so we'll continue to do that. Don't have formal plans to do that in the interim, I'd be quite honest saying. But I think we've always been about finding people who have that same commitment to excellence, and how can we support, bring you down to the hacienda, show you what we do, and then having those mutually beneficial or reciprocal relationships. So yeah, it's not a formal priority, but I would love to know more as well. And it's something that we will do once we get over the crisis and are able to kind of plan for some of those experiential pieces, or look at virtual opportunities to have, virtual activations with musicians.
So you talked about your summer tour plans. I'm assuming you had a lot of sponsorship type stuff lined up. Where does that stand right now? Are you able to get refunds on those things? Are you able to reallocate some of that money elsewhere?
Yeah, it was a very, I think, ongoing, right? So it is a very ongoing, and I think thoughtful conversation, right? Because you have these partners who, they make their livelihood from live events and venues, much in the way we wanted to support bartenders. Bartenders service industry are 16% of the American workforce. And so we didn't want to turn our back on them, in the same way we didn't want to turn our back on our event partners. So where there's festivals, where there's small venues where we would host or sponsor, pouring rights, etc. So we're still assessing ways. There are some on the back half of this year that we will continue to support as well and be thoughtful about it as well. But I will be honest, like part of our approach is we'll probably be much more conservative in our spend, as many advertisers and marketers are, not to be efficient, but more so because the tone, like when is the time to really dig in and invest forward into the pandemic. So we'll continue to assess that. I think from a sponsorship perspective, though, we are looking at ways to shift some of the focus more to digital commerce, more to off-premise retail, which is liquor stores, et cetera. So we'll prioritize those things because that aligns more with where consumers are spending and where they expect to have Patrón, but absolutely not taking our eye off the ball in terms of sponsorships and venues. So we're actually having those conversations on likely a daily basis. So it's a very timely question.
Are you still on TV, or how do you view TV right now? Not much sports programming. I know you guys have done sports in the past.
Yeah, aside from what everybody's watching Last Dance, and I think everybody's finished watching Tiger King as well. There isn't a whole lot of mass moments on TV, but so our Cinco de Mayo activation. So the 20 bartenders that'll be on Instagram tonight at 5 p.m. Eastern time. We're promoting that on TV. So we're still on TV. In a meaningful way to drive people to that, Simply Perfect Cinco activation. But our TV absolutely, after this campaign, probably reassess. We won't, some of the TV we would have done from a summer perspective, we'd probably look at shifting and transferring some of those dollars. But absolutely, look at online, TV is hard to define, right? Is it linear? Is it broadcast? Or is it like online video? So you'll probably see a shift formats and media, not necessarily the actual messaging and vehicles. So it will heavy up online video. People are spending a lot more time on Instagram and some of these broadcast social channels. So we'll follow those eyeballs, and we can still make an impression without, I think some of the cost, I think cost commitments of TV at a time where we're trying to literally be a little more conservative.
So I know you're a marketer, you're not the supply chain guy, but I got to ask, I know there's been some questions about in the beer industry on what's going on in Mexico, and are they allowing brewers to operate? And this is similar, it's along the lines of a question we have from Daniel on LinkedIn, asking how agave farmers are being affected and how you might support them. Are you still able to get your product in to the US right now? And are you doing anything to support the farmers?
It's a great question. I appreciate the opportunity to share what Patrón does for our agave farmers. Listen, the pandemic has affected the entire supply chain. We're not immune. So from farmers to logistics to transportation to restaurant owners to restaurant landlords to the staff, everyone's affected. I've got a brother-in-law, who works at a restaurant. They're been unemployed for weeks. Now they're starting to come back, but that's going to be a very long process. And so if you look at the agave farmers, we have long-term contracts with agave farmers, some as long as 25 years. And we've been around for 31 years. So we've protected those contracts. We've doubled down on our commitment to protect their business as well, but also, I think supporting them through this. And so we lock in long-term contracts. So when agave is at a high price, like it is now, because everybody's drinking Patrón tequila and putting agave syrup on their acai bowls, we still protect that profit, and obviously they make more. But in 2 or 3 years, the agave price is going to drop because I think the market will right size and we'll have more supply. And then, of course, we still protect them on the time. So we have those long-term contract relationships. We definitely think decade to decade with our suppliers. So I think we're one of the, like I said, the few tequila companies, because we make our own tequila. And, we don't just market it. We're not a logo or a label on a bottle. We have the contracts in place that, we at our hacienda, where we will protect those relationships, but also make sure they're profitable, they're successful, and they can take care of their family as well.
So you mentioned earlier that, you're at the same time you're moving a lot of this stuff virtually. You're preparing for when bars and restaurants can reopen. What you kind of on the front lines of that? What can you share with our viewers on your opinion on when bars are going to somewhat get back to normal and what that's going to look like? I mean, there's been discussion. Maybe you have some more space between people. Maybe the actual physical bar itself won't be running for a while. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, it's interesting, and there's no one answer because there's, based on the phase, I think that a state or a local government is in, it highly impacts the regulations of the bar. So for Texas, for instance, where I'm at, we've reopened at 25% capacity in phase one for bars, for restaurants, that have bars, et cetera. And we know that, I think I mentioned this before, is, our research shows us that about half of the US consumers, at least, won't be comfortable going back out until there's, testing or a vaccination. And so we know that while there is that kind of probably minority that will be comfortable going back into restaurants or bars, I think it's going to be a long-term recovery. I think we're going to have to think about right sizing supply chain for sure, but also, most restaurants can't survive on 25% of their revenue, right? If you look at the margins, alcohol is probably one of the highest margin, items in most food and beverage, menus. It's going to be a long road, and so our focus has been on, driving the traffic we can to restaurants and bars where we could support, but also, how are we shifting some of the virtual gigs to support the individual bartenders so they can still make a meaningful income outside of the bar by doing it virtually. And we also support James Beard Foundation. Many of you know James Beard Foundation for, the culinary excellence, and it is that. But actually, they also have a foundation that's really focused on micro grants to businesses so they can have operational cost relief, but also, governmental lobbying and awareness so that when restaurants do open, they have bartenders to work them, but also consumers to come back to. And so we've been behind the scenes working with a lot of our institutional partners to try to support with money, but also support with awareness as well. So I think it's going to be a long road. My own personal opinion is that I think we're going to have the effects of this for, years to come. And I think as a brand and a business, we want to be supportive along that journey, supporting the individuals, but supporting their families as well.
So we're almost running out of time. I did want to ask you on a more of a personal level, what have you learned about yourself in these last 6 weeks? And obviously having to work from home, what's been the biggest revelation to you?
A great question. My biggest revelation is I don't want to go back to work. Now, let me qualify that because my boss might be watching. I want to go back to work I want to go back to the office or back to job or career, but I don't want to go back to the ways of working and I've seen this in the last 2 months in your organization, EJ, you've probably seen this too, the nimbleness, the volatility management, the things that you've probably been pushing for, the empathy in our organizations has been remarkable. I mean, you saw the ad campaign by all the professional sports leagues coming together to not stand out, but stand together. You've seen Bacardi, right? We're celebrating World Cocktail Day. We're bringing all of our brands together, from Goose to Bombay Sapphire, to Bacardi Rum, to Dewar Scotch, to come together to support. So you're seeing it at the brand level, the corporate level, but also the human level. My team, I've spent more time probably talking in one-on-ones with my team in the past 2 months than I had in a while, to be quite honest. We would have otherwise been on a plane or the travel to the conferences. And even though that's great, I think the virtual connections have allowed us to really have meaningful interactions. And now when we ask somebody, hey, how are you doing? We mean it. It's not just good. No, tell me, how are your parents? How are your kids? How are you making? And so I would love to not go back to the ways of working. I want to keep that humanity, keep that empathy for one another. At the end of the day, I think this has all taught us a valuable lesson in just, putting first things first. I want to sell some tequila, but I also want to take care of the people who help me do that.
Well, that's you're speaking the truth there. I want to thank you again for your time on this very busy day for you. You've got an event later on tonight, and
Cinco.
So we'll let you go and work on that. And thanks for your time, Adrian Parker, VP of Marketing for Patrón. Before we leave, I want to thank our Ad Age crew: Alfred Mascaroni, Max Sternlick, Eilis Liffering, for making this live stream happen. And I want to invite everyone to tune in tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Eastern for another remotely live episode. Ad Age Tech reporter Garrett Sloan will be joined by Pinterest Chief Revenue Officer John Kaplan. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.
Thanks, EJ. Take care.
Thank you.